Hey guys, Lolio here. With Blizzcon coming up in just a few days, there's been a lot of speculation as to what will be announced. Many of us have been hoping for another WoW expansion announcement, but with Warlords so close, it doesn't seem that likely. However, some smart users on MMO Champion were recently checking up on Blizzard's trademarks and found something pretty interesting. In previous years, expansions were often trademarked just days in advance of BlizzCon, which is what happened with both Wrath and Warlords. What these guys discovered is that a trademark has been filed in Blizzard's name for something called Eye of Azshara. So the big question here is it real or is it fake? And the answer is, we don't really know yet. There's evidence that supports both sides of the argument. Probably the biggest factor that's discounting it at the moment is that the domain name for eyeofazshara.com was registered with GoDaddy, but has been rejected by them already for an unknown reason. There's speculation that the website was made by someone other than Blizzard and rejected because they didn't want to actually pay for the domain, and this is putting the trademark into possible hoax territory as well. Plus, ignoring the trademark, why would Blizzard announce an expansion just days before they're releasing one? A lot of people are saying it would kill the hype. But the far more interesting stuff is the evidence that points to this being true. One, this is around the time Blizzard usually registers trademarks, and it hasn't been taken down yet. Aside from the dark below thing, which actually did turn out to be a real product from Activision, none of the trademarks we ever found have been fake in the past. This gives some credence to the idea that this is something official and made by Blizzard. Even if it is real, some are saying it's a Hearthstone expansion, which we know is very likely to be announced at this BlizzCon. Now this idea sounds pretty good on paper, but I also think it's pretty unlikely. First, we know that the expansion is not going to be like the adventure mode that Naxxramas had. As far as we know, there isn't any PvE content, it's just a ton of new cards being added through new packs. And secondly, recent evidence is pointing towards the expansion being mechanical or engineering themed, with the November card back being Goblin themed, and several community members receiving blueprints of other mechanical cards already in the game. One interpretation of this though, which would make sense, although it would be terribly disappointing to me at least, is that Eye of Azshara is referring to a Goblin engineering themed Hearthstone expansion, as in Azshara the zone, which goblins have controlled since Cataclysm, instead of Azshara the character. Some cards apparently from the Hearthstone expansion have supposedly been leaked, with a few being mechanical, like Flame Leviathan and Iron Juggernaut, but one is Trade Prince Gallywix, who certainly had an impact on the Azshara zone. The link here is a bit tenuous, but it's definitely there, and we haven't seen a different trademark for a Hearthstone expansion, so we can't rule this part out. One thing to note regarding release and announcement timeframes is that at Gamescom this year, Tom Chilton said that they had intended to release Warlords about 6 months earlier than the actual date. That leads me to believe that they would have announced the next expansion this BlizzCon, because interviews have told us that they are working on it quite a bit, and they've done announcements in that sort of time frame before, with Wrath of the Lich King being announced 6 months after Burning Crusade came out. But with things being delayed, we're not really sure where they're at in terms of development with the next expansion. And at this point, it does seem unlikely that we'll get a full-on announcement and a big showing of the next expansion, whether it's Eye of Azshara or not. While I don't agree that it would kill the hype entirely, it is something to consider. I saw someone on MMO Champion compare it to announcing the iPhone 7 just before releasing the 6, but I think there's a pretty big difference. With the iPhone, Apple would be releasing hardware that was already deemed to be obsolete, but in Blizzard's case, it would be showing a commitment to WoW going forward. It would show that there is more content coming up, and that they're going to continue releasing updates. Each WoW expansion isn't really that separate like an iPhone. It's an ever-evolving game, not a stagnant piece of hardware. But aside from that, what we know about BlizzCon doesn't make an announcement very likely. In previous years, they've announced expansions every other BlizzCon, and considering we just heard about Warlords last year, it would be pretty different from what they usually do. But with Blizzard always talking about releasing expansions faster, it's hard to rule out. However, looking at the BlizzCon panel schedule, there's nothing that really indicates a big WoW announcement. Previously, they've had a panel like Warcraft What's Next, which didn't really spoil it, but hinted that there was something there. This year, all we've got for WoW panels are the Items, Classes, and Garrisons panel, along with an open Q&A panel. There is one very interesting thing in the schedule though. Right after the opening ceremony on the first day is a conspicuous 2.5-hour gap with no panels on the main stage. Now there usually is a break after the opening ceremony, but more like a 45-minute one, not over 2 hours. There's quite a bit of speculation right now that it's some sort of secret panel that they don't want anyone to know about, where they'll reveal something like Eye of Azshara or Overwatch, which is another trademark that appears absent from the schedule. Let's assume for a moment that the trademark is legit, because that's far more fun than the alternative. What would an Eye of Azshara expansion entail? Queen Azshara is one of the last established villains in WoW lore that we haven't really dealt a blow to. She was featured briefly in Cataclysm, but technically the Naga succeeded and won in Vashj'ir. We know she's had loyalties with both the Burning Legion and the Old Gods, although she's also very narcissistic and really only seeks to advance her own goals. She's been described as extremely powerful, and is able to manipulate nearly anyone into falling in love with her. In Well of Eternity in Kata, we briefly fought her as a Night Elf, but she escaped without us ever hitting her due to her skill at manipulation. Azshara could definitely hold her own as an expansion end boss, likely rivaling the power of people like Kil'jaeden. And there's a ton of content involving the seas and various islands like Kul Tiras that would wrap up a lot of loose ends in lore and make for an interesting expansion, so the potential is certainly there. I know a lot of people hear Azshara and think of Vashj'ir and underwater questing, which was certainly a very polarizing experience, but I don't think we'd get a ton of underwater content, maybe one zone, but it would probably be optional. The bottom line regarding the trademark is simply that we don't know yet. We don't know if it's real, if it's fake, or if it's related to WoW. We may find out before BlizzCon through a Blizzard employee denying it on Twitter or something, or we may just have to wait and see what's in store next week. But either way, we'll know soon enough. Personally, I'd love an Azshara expansion, but I'm not totally sold on this trademark after what happened with the Dark Below. I'm curious, what do you guys think? Are you super hyped for an Azshara expansion, or are you dreading more underwater questing, or do you think it's for Hearthstone? Anyway, that's all from me for today. If you enjoyed the video or found it informative, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.